So then establish this pure motivation that for the benefit of all sentient beings, think I must attain an awakened state, perfectly and completely awakened state of Buddhahood in order to meaningfully benefit sentient beings, in order to actually bring them, to establish them on the level of Buddhahood. And in order to do that, we must give rise to bodhicitta, to protect it and prevent it from degenerating until it becomes perfect, until it reaches the full flourishing of the awakened state. And in order to conduct ourselves in such a way that that actually occurs, then we are listening to the teachings of Shantideva on how to do that, how to manifest bodhicitta and guard it and bring it to perfection. We are now in the 8th chapter, which is the chapter on meditative concentration, the teachings on how to develop the paramita of meditation. And the chapter Shantideva has presented it in three phases. The first phase is how to avoid the pitfalls of distracting thoughts, both on an outer level by seeking, by being alone, by seeking solitude, and not just seeking solitude, although it says I've seen it in different texts, maybe sutras, where just making an aspiration to go into a solitude in order to work on your mind has great merit, has great benefit. And then Shantideva, of course, goes into some details on how to, or what that would look like, what kind of environment is ideal. But basically, I think for our purposes, we need to practice meditation in a safe place with as few interruptions as possible. And when we find such a time and a place, we should begin by rejoicing that we have this time and this place in order to work on our mind. Not think how better it would be if it was at a better time, or how better it would be if you were in a better place. like some cave somewhere or some retreat center somewhere or something like that, but to really settle into the attitude that this is the perfect time for me to work on my mind, and this is the perfect place for me to work on my mind, and what I'm about to do, whatever practice is developing this bodhicitta, is the perfect practice in order to tame and train my mind in bodhicitta. And so encourage yourself and reflect on that in order to, what we say, to secure your seat. I say, in order to, your mind should be in your body and your body should be on the cushion. That's sort of the outer retreat. And in a retreat, as Shantideva goes into in some small detail, is preventing your mind from wandering towards its habitual attachments to your responsibilities, your worldly responsibilities, to your friends, family, and so forth, but to just cut that attachment, recognize it for what it is, and cut that. Understand that everything is impermanent, and at some point you will have to separate from all these things that you have become habituated to, attached to. And then also attachment to your own body and its needs and wants, and to the bodies of others through desire. So anyway, these are all outlined in the first phase of this chapter. And again, Shantideva is really just drawing from the sutras. And in certain sutras, some sutras, all these points are gone into in much greater detail, all these contemplations. Then for the actual practice of developing this shamatha and vipassana, although if you've looked, even this first phase of practice, contemplating the forms, the impermanence of forms, the impermanence of relationships, and so forth, there is an element there not only of being undistracted from that theme of contemplation, but also as he brings out from time to time, the deeper aspects which lead to this vipassana meditation. And of course, even throughout the previous chapters, from time to time, Shantideva will introduce this deeper aspect of the practice that is that kind of culminates in the 9th chapter, the next chapter. Then in the second aspect of the second phase of contemplating, there is what we have gone through the contemplation of equalizing oneself with others. And as you can follow that train of thought, contemplate how, as Shantideva presents, just thinking of others as I and I as others, of all sentient beings being a whole. As you can maintain that for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 1 minute, 90 seconds, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. You can create a habit, become habituated to that train of thought, then without any distractions, then that is your mind. That is how you are taming your mind in shamatha. And again, how from time to time Shantideva introduces the ideas that bring forth this greater insight into the nature of phenomena. Because here it seems like Shantideva's theme here really is to target self-clinging. This habit of identifying with our body and our life as having an actual owner. That there's actually someone who owns all of this inner phenomena of thoughts and memories and emotions, and that there is an owner of all of our outer experiences. And so again, in that second phase of this equalizing self and other, at first Shantideva is saying how to see and contemplate how all beings want to be happy and all beings want not to suffer. And that's one level of equalizing. And then it goes deeper and deeper. Buddhism, the way that, if you think of how Buddhism was taught or how Buddhism is taught, the most easiest contemplation is impermanence. It's easy because it's obvious. It's so obvious. It takes very little, how do we say, penetrative, takes very little penetration. Anybody on the street can begin to pay attention to impermanence if they have the disposition for it. It's very ordinary, very common. And so it's very easy to get a grip on it, to understand it. And even people who are not on the spiritual path rely on the truth of impermanence to get through bad patches. It might help them develop patience and forbearance, and even compassion. Then the other mark of Buddhism is these three marks of Buddhism, three ways that Buddhism is known by. The second way, the second teaching Buddha gave was the teachings on suffering. And to appreciate that, and what suffering refers to is not just the obvious changes from happiness, but also the underlying suffering of being attached to what is impermanent and what is merely the arising of causes and conditions. And for that, an individual needs to be able to go a little bit deeper. You have to be a little bit more willing and able to look a little bit below the superficial way that things appear to us, to see that all things are by nature unsatisfactory. They are not completely fulfilling. And that is not necessarily the domain of everyone, like impermanence. Then this third feature of the Dharma, Buddha Dharma, is non-self. And non-self is much more profound. It takes much more penetrative insight to appreciate. And that's where we've landed here with this, in this chapter, that Shantideva is actually, he's really targeting this self-clinging. The truth of non-self manifesting in the practitioner as the wisdom of non-duality. And his method here, and there are many methods, but the method that Shantideva here is presenting has to do with this sequence of first equalizing oneself with others, and this has the effect of eroding that uniqueness that we apply to ourselves. And then this next section that we are at now of actually exchanging self and other. Which further erodes or further grinds away at that persistent habit, or that our deep habit of self-identity, self-cherishing. So then we are at, I believe, verse 111. Yeah, I think so. And this is the section that has been, according to the commentary that we're using, Kimball Kunpel's commentary, then this is the beginning of the phase of exchanging self with other. This third section. Okay. So these, let's say we have 3 verses here, 111, 12, and 13. And these are, these verses, well, they give the justification for exchanging self and other, as well as countering our sort of possibly our sort of pseudo instinctual resistance to the practice of exchanging self and other, just as he did for the previous section of countering our stubborn, the stubbornness and the excuses we give for not equalizing ourselves with others. But here, and then he talks about how possible it is to actually exchange self for other and other, change places with others. So he says in 111, this drop of sperm and blood belonged to others, yet through strong habituation I came to have in its regard a sense of I, though in itself it is devoid of entity. And so here, of course, sperm and blood, as it refers to as a footnote, has to do with the sperm from the man, and then the ovum, the egg of the woman, come together during a sexual act. And at that point, consciousness attaches itself to that little bitty beginning of life. And then that divides, and then what do you call that? Multiple divisions happen, and then a baby is matures in the womb. And according to the teachings of a Buddha, then that whole process begins with this merging together of the sperm, I guess not the spermatozoa, and the ovum and the consciousness that is migrating from a previous life to its present life, based on its karma and its karma and the prana. And so then that consciousness, which is in the habit already of being attached to this notion of a self, begins to apply that idea, that, I don't know, crazy idea of the existence of a self, it again applies it to its new home in this little, what is that, a zygote or some, this whatever it's called, this, yeah, okay. And then through the course of gestation in the womb, then that self undergoes all kinds of reactive expressions of its self-clinging. And from self-clinging, again, you have sensations and feelings and context. And that context comes from its habitual, what it's become habituated to. And so for certain feelings are painful, certain feelings are blissful, certain unconscious feelings are there, and so forth. But the whole process of gestation is the reinforcement of that consciousness clinging to a new body as it's me, my body. So as Shantideva says here, and of course, as Shantideva said in the very first verses of this, he said, this is just to encourage myself here. You know, so he's just talking to himself. And if you happen to be, as we are, you know, eavesdropping on his soliloquies to himself, then I hope it's beneficial, he says, you know, so. And he said here, you know, I came to have in its regard, in other words, I came to take that that body as being an I, though in itself it's devoid of entity. It doesn't have the slightest existence as something that is our belonging. There's no logical, and a lot of Shantideva's self-counseling appeals to logic here. It's illogical. Neither the spermatozoa nor the ovum, those are from two completely different people. They're not, there's no basis for thinking that it's I. Even those two initial things came about from other people. But that's when our present I began to develop as being something that had this body, my body. And so he's saying here, since that's the case, then why not identify another's body, calling it my I? I did it when I first entered the womb. I started to relate to those two little drops as I. So there's no real reason why I shouldn't now apply that same logic and apply it to others and call others' body I, and vice versa. Why should it be hard to think of this, my body, as another's? I should be able to grow accustomed to that perspective. It's just a changing in your point of view. My body now, I'll think, belongs to others. Some parts of the Dharma we take as articles of faith, or some teachings we take because basically we're already maybe kind of a good person. And so when Buddha taught about loving kindness and patience and compassion and so forth, we kind of adopted that and tried to apply those to our life. But there's still what we could say is articles of faith. Here, we're being asked to do something that's a little bit more bizarre. You know, it's bizarre to shift the whole identity towards others being I, and I don't know, my language is, when I say I now, I mean all other beings. That's what Shantideva is asking us here, or that's what he's proposing. This is the teachings. And this body actually belongs to others. This is the exchanging idea. This body belongs to others now. And I accept them as my body. And so why not this body? Yeah. And perceiving now the faults possessed by I, the ocean of good qualities that are in other, I shall lay aside all love of self and gain the habit of adopting other beings. So now by acknowledging and accepting all the teachings that Buddha has given on the harmful outcomes of self-clinging. Self-clinging as the source of all suffering for every being. So acknowledging that and accepting that, and on the other hand, then ocean of good qualities, all the teachings that Buddha gave on the value and the value and the virtue of recognizing the importance of loving kindness and compassion and selflessness and altruism. Well, selfless altruism, same, I think, altruism. You know, contemplating the goodness and the virtue of those and the positive outcomes of acknowledging and accepting the virtues and valuing others over valuing the self. Then I shall lay aside, you know, I shall basically, this is, I should renounce love of self, that self-identity, and gain the habit of adopting other beings, accepting other beings. So we take these three verses together as one theme to get into as a way of answering what the reason is, what the reason is for exchanging self and other. So then, so then in the next half a dozen verses, just as these verses are all taught as a way to following up the previous 3 chapters, which has to do with kind of good sound reasoning, applying the reasoning that he's given. Now he's teaching on developing kind of an enthusiasm for exchanging self and other. Just as hands and other limbs are thought of as the members of a body, can we likewise not consider others as the limbs and members of a living whole? So how can we say that all beings, how could all beings, there's so many variety of all beings, you know, there's microscopic beings and then elephants and all beings, how could they all be me in their variety? And then he says here, then, just as hands and other limbs are thought of as the members of a body, basically all of the parts of our body form one, they're all parts of one body. They're thought of as the members of a body. Can we likewise not consider others? Then through the same logic, then we can consider others as limbs and members of a whole. They form part of the whole universe of sentient beings. Just as we have a heart inside of our body, and we have fingernails and toes and a nose and all those varieties. So there's no reason why we can't completely identify with all beings as I. Just as in connection with this form, devoid of a self, my sense of I arose through strong habituation, why should not the thought of I through habit not arise related to another? Okay, let's see. Just as in connection with this form, devoid of a self. So this so we have this idea of our identity, my body, and my body is hot. Like right now, my body is hot. It's getting hot in here. And I'm seeking some kind of homeostatic thing, and my inner body is probably doing the same thing. And it's I have this sense of I, and it's that habit. So I am comfortable, I am in pain, I am happy. So why can't I apply that same habit? It's a habit to others. When I say I am in pain, I mean all beings. Basically, the slogan is, they are me. And so the outcome of that kind of thinking, he talks about in the next verse, 116, the outcome is, thus when I work for others' sake, there'll be no sense of boasting self-congratulation. It's just as when I feed myself, I don't expect to be rewarded. So basically, providing protection to beings, protecting beings from harm and insecurity, and giving beings what you can because of their importance, because they are now I, is its own reward. It's like a true bodhisattva. And when they think of sentient beings, they think of sentient beings as being like their child, their children. They're all children. And just like a parent, each child has their own personality, their own strengths and weaknesses. But a parent sees beyond that and sees them all equally. And if they're happy, then there's no other kind of happiness that kind of a parent needs. Just like a bodhisattva doesn't need extra happiness that's directed towards them to be happy. Working for the benefit of beings is its own reward. And also, just as I defend myself from even slight disparagement, likewise, for beings, I shall now grow used to having a mind protective and compassionate. What this kind of teaching exposes, I don't know, maybe let's say karmically, I mean, we're dealing with causes and conditions. There's intention, there's thought patterns, habits, there's all this very juicy causes and conditions going on that we're cranking in a new direction. And what Shantideva is saying here, or what the teachings, these teachings, which also, by the way, these teachings do come from sutras. They're not an invention of Shantideva. They come from this one sutra, Tathagata Guhya Sutra, maybe something like that, and others. But what's I going to say? You'll notice in this, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but in this teaching on equalizing self and other here, maybe we're used to hearing teachings on the four measurables and so forth. Here, there's no mention of thinking of beings as your mother, if you've noticed. And this chapter has no mention of cultivating how all beings at one time or another has acted as your mother or your father, and so you should develop compassion for them based on the kindness that they gave you. That's not here. The assumption and the facts of the case here are that by equalizing self and other, that compassion begins to have room to arise, and exchanging self with other gives rise to that compassion that's wished for. That's the core of bodhicitta. So compassion and loving kindness and having a protective attitude towards others is is it seems to be like a wind, a breeze that accompanies this practice of equalizing and exchanging self and other. Because what's happening is this self-clinging is being interrupted. And since it's a delusion to begin with, when we undermine all the foundations of self-clinging, as we talked about earlier, our possessions, our body, these are our merit, our qualities, clinging, the presence of a body, the presence of possessions, the presence of our qualities, are a platform or a foundation for self-clinging. Again, we're not harming or assassinating the self. We are growing accustomed to the truth that there is no self to begin with. And of course, that culminates in the 9th chapter of Prajna, wisdom. And Prajna means, in this case, wisdom means the wisdom of non-self. And so this practice is one of kind of tearing away this foundation for self-cherishing. And it does it by kind of turning the tables on self-cherishing, decentralizing it so that it doesn't any longer have any ground. That delusion has no more ground, and it collapses. And then, not intentionally, there arises this compassionate wisdom. So as he says here, then, just as I defend myself from even the slight disparagement, the slightest little eyebrow or gaze or what do you call it, stink eye we might get, then we protect others from their suffering. And when we begin to equalize and exchange ourselves for and others, that protective quality naturally arises. I say, and we want to protect others from even the slightest injury. So that here in the next verse here says, this is why Lord Avalokita, out of great compassion, blessed his name, that those caught in the midst of multitudes might be released and freed from every fear. So that refers to Avalokiteshvara. So basically after, of course here the Avalokiteshvara is referring to the Bodhisattva. So at one time, like in the sutra, the Avalokiteshvara gave rise to the intention to attain unsurpassable awakening, took refuge, in other words, and then gave rise to bodhicitta, and said that may this aspiration that just by remembering my name, may every fear that sentient beings have may, just by remembering my name, all come to nothing. And then let whoever stands before a crowd invoke my name 3 times and have no fear. He said these 2 things. So even, and what this seems to refer to is that like it's embarrassing to stand before a group of people, or for some of us, it's even embarrassing just to be with other people. And so just by remembering and invoking the name of Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, then even that minor kind of protects against even being embarrassed, might be released from every fear, in that case, embarrassment. Realizing or having learned and know the benefits, we should understand, or we should not be deterred, or we should be rid of any apprehension that this exchange for self and other is too difficult. And as it says, 119, it says, and so we should be undeterred by hardships, for through the influence of use and habit, people even come to grieve for those whose very names struck terror in their hearts. So just by adopting this perspective, this point of view, through the over time, and a gradual and growing familiarity with this way of thinking, of taking others' suffering and giving your protection, giving them your happiness, then it will become easier and not difficult. So we should know that. Even here, as an example, people even come to grieve for those whose very names struck terror in their hearts. So even though somebody came on really intensely in our life or something, or they look like a very fierce person or something, but then we kind of got to know them. And by getting to know them, our fear and anxiety became less and less, so that even when you go to the, I don't know where people go anymore, where you go to the club, or you go to the even the Dharma center, and that person doesn't show up, you get worried. Oh, I hope they're all right. Why aren't they here? You go. So that's the idea here. People even come to grieve those who struck terror in their hearts previously. So after we get to know them. Similarly, even though just exchanging self for others, I mean, why would just the idea of giving away our happiness mentally, even though it's just mental, even mentally, it can be very, we can put up a lot of barriers, emotional blocks to it, and scramble for excuses why that can't be a good thing to do. So we should know and be courageous, like we took the Bodhisattva vow in chapter 3. And so we've become a Bodhisattva, like a baby level, perhaps, or more, I don't know. But we have to A bodhisattva means one who acts for the benefit of others with courage. That's an integral part of sattva, is that sort of heroic aspect, outrageous aspect, what do you say, unconventional. Those desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and others should make the interchange of I and other, and thus embrace a sacred mystery. So this is it's called a mystery because it's beyond the scope of most people, and it's beyond the scope of or beyond the reach, or it's not part of, it's not a possibility for those on the lesser paths of the Shravakayana, or with the Hinayana attitude, those with the intention to liberate themselves from the causes of rebirth in samsara. So it's a mystery. It should embrace the sacred mystery. It's okay. Then the next 3 or 4 verses have to do with, okay, specific. The next 4 verses again take on this one of the foundations of self-clinging, which is our physicality, our body. And so in order to get rid of this self-cherishing, we need to break the habit of thinking that our bodies are ourselves. Because of our attachment to our bodies, even little things alarm us, meaning, mosquitoes and little things like that, mosquitoes and little drops of oil coming out of the bottom of our car, little drops of things. Then this body, this source of so much terror, who would not detest it as the worst of foes? Even like a little spark or a little steam, or we get alarmed by that. So here what he's saying is here, it's our bodies. I mean, a mosquito is just making a living, basically. It's just keeping itself alive, feeding its little eggs or whatever, however it works. And sparks that fly, they're just incidental occurrences. Everything is just arises through causes and conditions. There's no intention. But it's our bodies that provide the basis for our pain. Just like an enemy. Like, who's the enemy? in that case? The mosquito or this body? So again, it's sort of a perspective, a shift in our perspective about this my body habit. Body is body. My is extra. And it's a delusion. And it's not an innocent delusion. It's the kind of delusion that creates a lot of suffering in the world for oneself and for others. So it's not just a small matter, thinking that the body is my body. Wishing to relieve our body's ills, our hungry mouths, the dryness of our throats, we steal the lives of fishes, birds, and deer. In other words, and lie in wait along the road. So we engage in the whole process of eating the bodies of other beings who also had attachment to their bodies and so then felt pain at that point of their death. Deer, we don't eat deer so much, but we do eat fish and birds and beef and pigs and cows and horses, this kind of thing. And lie and wait along the road. That's what thieves did, I guess, in the 7th century India. They were stealing to steal from beings, and of course here even Shantideva as a part of a monastic community. There was also corruption and people embezzling the funds of the Nalanda, the administration and so forth. So it covers all of these things just to enrich our body. And for the sake of profit and position, some there are who even kill their parents or steal what has been offered to the triple gem, because of which they'll burn in hell of unrelenting pain. So, of course, killing your parents is one of the heinous acts that lead to what's called that's one way. There's no Bardo experience. You immediately find yourself in a realm, in a world of intense suffering, intense pain, exaggerated pain, killing your mother, killing your father, killing an enlightened being. These kinds of things are considered to be heinous or the most egregious acts, as well as then it's not that bad, but also stealing from the Sangha is very bad effect. The effect of stealing funds from the Sangha is a very dangerous act. And so we do it to enrich the idea here is it's very body-centered action. My body needs, my body wants this, that, and the other thing. Where are the wise and prudent then who cherish, guard, and serve the body? who would not perceive it as their foe, and as their foe regarded with contempt. Okay, this heavy language, but the idea is that if you, even if you wish for happiness, then you will not obey the demands of your body and serve it as a slave, since it acts as an enemy. If you commit negative actions for the sake of your body, then your body is an enemy. It's causing you future suffering, and it's wrong-headed to not regard it as that, as having the potential to be your worst enemy. And so these verses here are trains of thought to kind of put a wedge between our body, identifying our body as ourselves. It dissuades us from that habit. So you work with that idea. Of course, I should say, of course, that if you didn't have a body, you wouldn't be listening to these teachings, or you wouldn't be capable of possibly thinking this way. So it's, but the teachings. When we read teachings, sometimes there's, and of course, if you aspire to be a good Vajrayana practitioner, then one of the samayas, one of the sacred commitments of Vajrayana, is not to disparage your body. And of course, the Buddha taught, of course, this category of this teaching is Mahayana Buddhism. And a lot of things that you might, that we've talked about here, Shantideva is quite, it's not just simply because he's a monastic, where there's certain restraints that you're always bound by, but it's because of the emphasis in Mahayana of uprooting the causes of this self-clinging. And that's the purpose. When we read texts that seem to be contradictory to, especially if you just read a lot and don't necessarily know how to apply the teachings, but just keep reading and always becoming inspired by the teachings, but not actually knowing exactly how to apply them or where to apply them, then the point of the teachings sometimes can be lost. And then you'll run into conflicting points, things that seem to be contradictory. And of course, the teaching the Buddha taught, as all the teachings of Buddha, are methods to antidote suffering and particularly its causes. And so it's important to know what the purpose of the teachings are, what is being targeted by the teachings. It's called, we can call it the key point. Like, what's the key point of the practice? Usually refers to, well, what's he getting at? What is the target of these shlokas or these verses? That's where it makes sense. Not, hey, that doesn't fit into all the teachings of Buddha. Teachings as Buddha is, respect the body, and the body's a temple, and they say, okay, that may be something like that for another purpose. But here it's very clear what the purpose is. So dig out the purpose of this, and don't feel conflicted that there's something wrong with seeing your body as your enemy. Of course, it's clear that if you don't have the capacity to engage in a path of awakening, you won't become awakened, even though you have the potential. It's not the case that just because we have the potential to wake up, that we will. Certain conditions have to come together. And one of them is we have to have a human body. I'm sure you've heard these teachings of the sort of prerequisites for the prerequisites for Dharma practice. We could say the prerequisites for discovering or awakening to the meaning of your life. Be a human being with certain attributes, certain cognitive capacity, and so on and so forth. And in the process of that contemplation, as Shantideva talked about in the first chapter, by the way, we appreciate and honor both the causes that brought about our capacity to practice the Dharma, and the causes, which was virtue of some description, and the effects, which is our capacity. The purpose here, the target of contemplating and absorbing ourselves in this trains of thought, just as in the first section of this chapter also, is to antidote self-clinging. Just like in the beginning of this chapter, contemplating the foulness of the body is just a bag of pus, and so forth and so on. The purpose, the key point of that contemplation was to ambush distracting thoughts before they occur. To cut off distracting thoughts. That was the purpose. They weren't stating the Buddhist view of body. It's all relative to the purpose that Buddha is aiming at, the target. Here, the target is that we have a habit of identifying our body as being a fairly large component of what we think of as our self-identity. When we're driving along calmly and relaxed, and we see in the rearview mirror red lights flashing and the siren, whoop, whoop, our body reacts. And we become fearful, filled with doubt and confusion, wonder what to do in seconds. It's because we are our bodies. That's the idea. So here, that's the purpose here. So this is to create what do you say? Is to dissuade us from that habit of clinging or identifying and cherishing the body as being ourselves. Okay. Then 125, if I give this, okay, now this is about kind of the defects of self-importance, this next area here, next section. If I give this, what will be left for me? This in quotes, thinking of oneself, the way of evil ghosts. If I keep this, what will be left to give? Concern for others is the way of heaven. So here we're talking about if we have this mentality of, oh, I can't give this away because then I won't have anything left. That's what's called, that attitude is an action. It's a mental activity that we are engaging in, which has, as the result of it, this says the way of evil ghosts means like the pretas and rudras and the different ways that self-clinging manifests in negative ways. And future poverty and poverty of spirit, poverty of place, poverty of circumstances, wealth, means, a poverty of means. So that's what that attitude gives rise to, what we would call painful effects of that attitude. But on the other hand, if we think, and what the new habit we have here is now, like, if I keep this, that it won't be good for me to keep this. I won't have anything to give. So your attitude is one of always putting others first, giving to others, not thinking of what you'll have left for yourself. That way. That's the way, I don't know, heaven here, not exactly, but that's the way that Buddha's, that's the way that, that's the path to Buddhahood. It's the path to Buddhahood. It's the way of the Bodhisattva. Call it this. It's the spiritual tradition of the enlightened ones. If to serve myself I harm another, I'll suffer later in the realm of hell. But if for others' sake I harm myself, then every excellence will be my heritage. Well, just like basically by harming oneself, it could just be giving giving your last piece of bread to someone, giving away your possessions. That you might be harming yourself, but it's making others happy. Freeing others from suffering by giving or giving your time to others, giving your energy to others to relieve them of suffering and or make them happy. That's what harming yourself means in that shloka, in that verse. just like the Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, as you know, when he first gave rise to this loving attitude in the hell realms, and then that launched his long career in practicing the paramitas, practicing generosity. And one of the acts of generosity that is the domain of the higher bodhisattvas is giving your body, as he did in his immediate previous lifetime before he was born as Siddhartha, by giving his body willingly, consciously, with great compassion and a kind of wisdom of understanding the empty nature, whereby he never felt any pain, but only compassion for the hungry mother tiger who was dying of starvation. So that kind of harm myself means that. And Buddha did that many times. When you can look in the Jataka tales for all the different stories of Buddha's previous life rebirths, Buddha's previous rebirths. All those are included in the Vinaya of the canon, and those are all a lot of the stories of how Buddha sacrificed his hand, his limbs, his legs for the sake of others. And many great masters who we know in our history are not legends, but who gave their own flesh and lives for the sake of freeing others from their suffering or bringing them to some meaningful happiness. And so to do that, then every excellence will be my heritage. That is to say, it will promote my own awakening. The path of awakening always includes, and when we think of like equalizing all beings, self and other, exchanging self and other, there is still the idea of your own mind and the effect it has on your mind, and how it leads to your own awakening of your own mind's absolute nature. It's not as though you become, and when people have this exhausting, what is it? Like they become, because they're so compassionate, they become exhausted. Or they're so empathetic, they can't do anything. Their empathy is that. So that's not what's being referred to here. Wanting what is best for me, stupidity, inferiority, and lower realms results. So if we make our own body or our own life if we have to be important, or if we have to be beautiful or handsome, or if we have to be wealthy, or if we have to be served, then that's that kind of need and that kind of attachment to self is what produces suffering. Lower realms, and then also various maturing of karma, even as a human, with stupidity and so forth. So let this be changed, applied to others. So again, it's this idea of reorientation, honors, and the realms of bliss will come. So if we want to, and then enslaving others, forcing them to serve me, I will come to know the state of servitude. But if it's labor for the good of others, then mastery and leadership will come to me. So instead of wanting to be served by others, here we turn that so that I will be a servant to others. I will provide and protect for others as I once did for myself. All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. So this is a very familiar refrain from Shantideva. So this is a real significant statement, very kind of global. So subject it to your reasoning. Is there need for lengthy explanation? Childish beings, meaning childish beings, he always refers to here, meaning beings who have worldly pursuits, and we've talked about that quite a bit. You know, acting for praise to avoid blame, and winning instead of losing, and these kinds of things. Is there need for lengthy explanation? Childish beings look out for themselves. Buddhas labor for the good of others. See the difference that divides them. So see what the difference is between those who are reoriented towards, who are oriented towards laboring without selfishness for the good of others, and those who are the compassion of the Buddhas, who what did I say? Those who only look to fulfill their own needs, only act to fulfill their own needs. So the idea here then is, let's be rid of selfishness and work for the benefit of others. If I don't interchange my happiness for others' pain, enlightenment will never be attained, and even in samsara, joy will fly from me. So that's clear. And so when others are happy, we should rejoice. And when others are suffering, we should give them our happiness. So even in samsara, joy and enlightenment will never be attained. If I do not interchange my happiness for others' pain, enlightenment will never be attained. And even in samsara, joy will fly from me. This is because of the principle of self-clinging being the cause of all suffering. Leaving future lives outside the reckoning. Forget about future lives. Even this life's needs are not fulfilled. The servants do not do their work, and masters do not pay the wages earned. So even if we don't, so explain this, exchanging our happiness for others' suffering, giving our happiness and taking on others' suffering, like forget about any long range or enlightenment, long range benefit or enlightenment. But even this life doesn't function without this taking and giving, without exchanging. This idea here, I don't know how 7th century India functioned as far as servings and so forth. It sounds like it's very translatable. It's just the way of human society. But if people are in a position where they're supposed to be doing some job, some work, in order to sustain themselves, but they're either dishonest or too lazy and don't do it, on the one hand. And then those who are in a position where they hire people to do things, but they're attached to their money, they're tight-fisted and don't give, then nothing gets done. The idea is it doesn't function. So what has to happen is that here what's called servants, those who are engaged to do a task for someone, they have to give up their discomfort for the sake of acting. They have to act. So that means they have to not be attached to being lazy or even like dishonest. And then the one who employs, say the employer, has to give up their attachment to paying the correct wage, a good wage. And if that doesn't happen, then neither side, the goals of neither one of them is achieved. So there has to be a give and a take, even in ordinary social functioning. That I think is what that refers to. Even this life's needs are not fulfilled when the servants don't do the work and masters don't pay the wages that were earned. So they have to give up the discomfort of paying, and the other one has to give up the discomfort of having to do something. Anyway, that's just the idea. You don't have to think about future lives. Casting far away abundant joys that may be gained in this or future lives, because of bringing harm to other beings, I ignorantly bring myself intolerable pain. So casting far away abundant joys that may be gained in this or future lives, because of bringing harm to other beings. So this has to do with not practicing these verses here, like 131, 132, 133, or if I do not interchange my happiness for others' pain. That the idea of these three verses are has as its content, if you don't exchange, if you don't practice the exchange of self and others, then and that's what, then the results are not good, basically. And here it has to do with bringing harm to others if we don't understand and discern the causes of happiness and suffering. And by avoiding the practice of exchange, we bring suffering. We bring suffering to ourselves and to others, both now and in the future. Okay, so I'm going to end there on 133 and take up. Okay, I think we can do this. I think so. 3.